Hello and welcome to today's video. My name is Jeannie and I'm going to be talking about the Human Design channel 6124, which is the channel of awareness. Now, some things to keep in mind as I'm going through this material, because it's coming from my perspective. I have this channel. I'm a 6'2" self-projected projector. I've got my head, ajna, throat, and G-center defined, and they're all defined right down the middle, which is a lot of individual circuitry. My 61 is defined in a conscious way, and the 24 is defined in an unconscious way. Okay, so gate 61 is the gate of inner truth and mystery, and gate 24 is the gate of returning. So if you have this channel, you're going to be in search of truth throughout your life. But this search is a search that takes place within yourself through constant thoughts and reflection. So it's not like an external thing, it's very, very internal. When this channel is used correctly, you're able to distinguish the comprehensible from the incomprehensible. Now, you might be asking yourself, how do I use this channel correctly? You follow your strategy and your authority so that you're able to immediately recognize what is worth spending your time on or not. If you decide to start the process of understanding something, what will happen is that, like, without following your strategy and authority, you're going to start spinning thoughts in your head until new knowledge is revealed to you. And this could feel like very, very chaotic, very not fun. So definitely, like, it is a projected channel. So even if you are a different type and you have this channel, you want to wait for the invitation just to help avoid that sensation of like going around and around and around until something new is revealed to you, because like that could take a minute. As we're going to go into this information, we're going to see how like this is the revelation of this information, of this knowledge, this inner truth that we're searching for is very spontaneous. It can't be controlled. Okay, so the thought process itself doesn't lead to anything because, like I just mentioned, insights happen by themselves. So the answer to the question will probably not come from brainstorming. It will just suddenly overtake you someday, no matter how active the thought process was. So again, like, it doesn't matter like how much you think about it. It's not something you can actively search for. It's going to drop in when it drops in. It's very spontaneous. For me, it's felt like, oh, like when it finally drops in, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like it feels like a knowing. That's what it's felt like to me. So the keynote here is that factor of suddenness. You discover truth, insights, but you cannot use your abilities to do so in a planned way. It's not controlled, because all of these brilliant thoughts come to you very, very suddenly. This is something that's very, very important to remember, and for me, like, I've been diving into this channel because it's the one that's been wreaking a lot of havoc in my life recently. And this is one of the things that I'm really going to focus on remembering, that there are 3 categories of knowable. There's what you need to know, what you don't need to know, and what is impossible to know. What we want to focus on is what we need to know. If we focus on the other 2, what we don't need to know and what's impossible to know, we're going to create this endless cycles of thoughts that are going to drive you crazy, and you can go to extremes. And that's what it literally feels like. It feels like in the times where like I'm not able to catch myself that I'm doing this, because this is the 24 for me is an unconscious energy, and learning to create more awareness around this. And yet still, like, I have moments where I'm like, oh, I'm doing it again. I'm returning and returning and returning to this over and over and over again, hoping to get an answer. In those moments where I haven't following my strategy and inner authority, and I'm going round and round and round in these mental loops. It literally feels like I'm about to go insane. And that is not fun. So when, like, again, because this is a projected energy, when you don't wait for an invitation, what can happen is that there's a lack of understanding from those around you, which will result in either an introverted state, like you go within and you feel like a lot of disappointment, and your mental abilities and gifts will still be there, but the opportunities for realization will decrease. And there's a mutative quality to this channel. So when we're looking at mutation, we're here to bring in the new, which in itself will be met with resistance if there's no invitation to share. Because, like, if we think of like the collective and the tribal, there's been established like this way of doing things, and change, people often resist change. And with this channel in particular, there's like bringing what is unknowable into the known, and if there's no invitation, it can be very hard for you to share this brilliant, beautiful information with others because there is no invitation. So this is one of the things that I really had to like accept, and like because for me, like, I don't know, it can be challenging. I'm going to just say that it can be challenging. The other thing that can happen is that you're not going to be recognized by others, and this is going to result in either you being so timid that you lose the ability to express your own opinion. And this is very, very important for this channel. We want to be able to express our opinions because they're so unique, and there's just so many gifts. There's so much mutation and change and like magic that can come in from all of these insights. The other thing that could happen is that you unceremoniously push your truth everywhere and anywhere in hopes of receiving recognition. So for the second one, I find like I relate more to the first one. I tend to go within and kind of like shut down a little bit. I feel a lot of disappointment, like when I'm not invited to share and there's no recognition. That theme of bitterness really comes up. But for the second one, I kind of think of like someone standing in the middle of like a public space and like yelling and shouting and trying to get, you know, that attention and, you know, yelling at people. But again, you're not going to really get anywhere if there is no invitation. They're not going to be able to hear you. And both of these lead to disappointment and can lead to addictions and those types of behaviors. Some of the characteristics of people who have this channel: you are the world's greatest thinkers. You are here to inspire others to think about life's mysteries. These are minds that constantly need to explore new intellectual areas in new ways. These are minds that are capable of creating whole new ways of thinking about things, and they need a great deal of recognition in this. They have a need and love for silence. They experience sounds or voices inside their heads. There's this keynote of like melancholy. These are melancholic minds where inspiration comes suddenly and unexpectedly, but it can never be controlled or predicted. And if you try to control or predict it, it just prolongs the insight from dropping in. You have a difficult time doing something if you don't understand the reason behind the action, which is like the why. Like, why am I doing this? Once you understand the why, it's like, okay, your energy shifts and the things that you're doing actually turn out to be much more effective. I experienced this with affirmations. It wasn't until I understood, okay, why am I saying the affirmation? I kept asking like why, until I understood it. That's when affirmations really started working for me. Another characteristic is that we're here to challenge the system and ask questions to get others to start thinking about possibilities and to start creating change. You know, new things, mutation, all that good stuff. the gift of this channel is that as long as you're not using this channel to try to solve your own life, your mind is always capable of inspiring someone else to see life in a totally new light. So this is one that I'm really working on remembering, because there's a lot of things that like I've been trying to solve in my life, but I realized that this gift isn't meant to be used for me. It's meant to be used to help other people, and then by helping other people and monetizing this gift, that's how I solve my, I don't want to say issues, but like the things that I need to be solved, like money and being able to support myself and things like that. So one of the questions, like when I was reading about this gift, one of the things that came to mind is this question that I really like to ask people. Like, as a projector, I like to go deep. I don't like the small talk. So one of the questions that I like to ask people is, what is the one thing that completely changed the way you saw the world once you learned that? Again, and this question reveals like it's bringing an element of the unknowable into the knowable. Mutation, like when you learn that, like how did your perspective change? Like I want to know that. And it can be like, it's an empowering question, right? Like, how did your view of the world change after this event? And it's like I'm looking for that moment in time where this person's trajectory in life completely shot up in like the best way possible. So that's one of my favorite questions to ask. And like when I was going through this information, I'm like, oh, okay, maybe this is why. This is one of my favorite questions, again, getting to like why. This channel is part of the individual circuitry. It's in the knowing subcircuit, and it mutates the tribe and the collective when the timing is right. I cannot emphasize that enough. There are other factors to consider, like when you're looking at your chart, but there can be a certain lack of caring that is built into this circuit, and I kind of relate to that. You might be someone who by design is not necessarily nurturing, and you can sometimes get lost in your own mutation, and you might be oblivious to the perception of others to a certain degree. There's also a theme of like not listening, and touch is something that can help keep you grounded and kind of like minimize this, and we're going to go into this in a little bit. But it kind of feels like when you're talking to someone, you're not just talking to them. Like this channel is a very acoustic in nature. There's a lot of noise, there's a lot of sound, internal, inner noise that occurs. So like I find that when I'm talking to someone, it's not just trying to hear what they're saying, but it's also the noise inside my head, my thoughts. My thoughts have like a sound quality to them, they're not visual. So it feels like as if there were two people in front of, like if I could give y'all a visual, there's two people in front of me and they're both talking at the same time, and it's like if you've ever been in that situation, you can kind of like focus your attention on one person, kind of pick up what they're saying, and then when you shift your attention to the other person, you kind of miss out on what the other person's saying. So it's kind of like that sensation, but like the other person's always in my head. When there's a lot of definition in the knowing circuit, it's very important to celebrate your uniqueness. You're here to be different, and problems arise when you try to be someone you're not. And this is something that I really had to decondition from, because I've got 3 channels, and all of these channels are individual circuitry. And for me, when I learned about my type in human design, like it made an impact. However, I want to say that circuitry was the thing that completely like changed everything for me. A lot of things clicked. I love circuitry. For me, it tells me like how the person is wired, and I'm just able to pick up on so much more when I take into consideration their circuitry, which I find like sometimes it isn't stressed enough, depending on who you're working with. But your uniqueness. This is something that I've always felt like an outlier in life, where I've just done and seen things so differently. And because this is a projected channel, and add to this that I am a projector, there's like a lot of waiting, and there's a lot of like, you know, before I knew that I had to wait, there was a lot of kind of like, there was a lot of like me trying to share my insights, and people weren't receiving them because there was no invitation to do so. So this caused a lot of bitterness and resentment and all of that. Another way that this showed up for me is with fashion. I always had like a very unique sense of style. I feel like I experienced a lot of rejection, and again, like there's this sister wound that showed up throughout my life, because a lot of my friends thought that, or they assumed that the way I dressed was because I wanted to draw attention to myself. I'm talking about like my style, my typical style of clothing used to be lace, ruffles, sequins, and I'm talking like everyday type of style for me. You know, I don't know, sometimes I think of like a casual day as kind of like t-shirt and jeans type of thing, but for me, like a casual day is like sequins and ruffles, and that for me is casual. You know, it's very normal. So again, a lot of like uniqueness, and it's about embracing that. And now that I've learned that I can use this to empower others, before it was more of like, well, you don't like the way I dress, okay. Or I would notice that people would kind of like look at me differently, or assume certain things about how much money I made, or things like that based on how I dress. Because like I have a thing for luxury, but doesn't mean that I pay high ticket prices for a lot of the things that I found. I know how to look for a good bargain. A lot of stuff I found thrifting. I love to thrift. I do have a markets environment, so that might be why. But before, I know I mentioned earlier that there could be like this certain lack of caring that's built into the circuit, and I felt that throughout my life, where I'm like, okay, well, you don't like how I dress, well, I don't really care. Like, I'm not dressing for you, I'm dressing for me, because this is what I like. But now that I've learned how to shift this into a more empowering vibe, like, okay, well, if you know this is kind of like triggering you, it could be showing you that there's some aspect of yourself that you know, can and want to express your uniqueness, and kind of like encourage that and empower that, and kind of let go of like, well, I don't care, that's on you. Kind of like go with that way of being, and use it to empower others. Okay, so like I've already mentioned, this channel is deeply acoustic sound. There's this is about like hearing thoughts. There's no visual component, so it's only like having the audio file for the thinking. And this next part I thought was very interesting. It really helped me understand like the uniqueness and the mutative quality to this channel. We've got like 4 aspects. We have the collective, the abstract, the logic, and the individual. The collective, abstract, and logic are related to each other. They need to be fulfilled through each other. The collective process is rooted in what already is and what has been taken in during the life movement. As you're alive and moving in space, you interact with the environment as you move. The abstract person interacts with the environment in its relatable present and reflects on it as a past phenomenon. The logic person goes through this movement and takes in the information and projects it into the future's path. What these 3 have in common is that they relate to what they've gone through. Now, when it comes to the individuality of the 61, when you come to inner truth, none of that exists. It's not a visual mental process. It's acoustic. It's not the visions that keep the mind occupied, but the static of the noise of the mind. So again, there's this component of bringing the unknowable into the known. Again, I want to emphasize this. It's called the law of the knower, which we've already touched on this, but kind of like keeping it concise with like the title. The law of the knower, which is those three things: know what is knowable and of value, know what is knowable and unnecessary, and know what is unknowable. And the key is to leave alone what is unknowable. If you don't know what is unknowable and you can't leave it alone, you go mad. Very, very literally. You feel like you're going to go insane. And I feel like many people do go insane. Be interesting to see like how people who do go through like certain like mental illness, psychosis, schizophrenia, all those, I'd be interested to see like how many of them have one of these gates of madness. But yeah, okay, we're gonna keep going. The 61st gate, which is the gate of inner truth, is the gate of my story. It involves a spontaneous mutation, so it has no foundation in either the past or the future, and it's not a sequence or a pattern. There's this pressure of the unknown or unknowable that drives the 61, where like it must know for itself. There's again this question of why, and many times it feels like it's hard to take someone's word for it, like if they just tell you something, because again, it's like you have to know for yourself, and it's kind of like that little child that's asking why, and you give them an answer and why, you give them an answer and why, until like you get to the root. That's kind of like what it feels like, getting to the root. So the 61 has like this struggle for silence. It wants silence in the mind. No voices talking, no dialogue, maybe music. And this is a silence that comes it's produced by the fact that you know what you need to know. It kind of feels like this sigh of relief, like I finally have an answer. Like my mind is satisfied and everything's quiet. Again, like that child that goes, mom, 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 while the mom's trying to do something else. And the mom finally goes, yes. And then the child gets what it needs, and then it kind of like goes away, that moment, like after so much like noise, and it's finally like quiet. That's what it feels like. There's this thing that Ross said. He said that when dealing with the 61, know thyself is the only thing of value to know. Everything else is secondary. If you know yourself, the unknowable is you, and you do not have to seek the unknowable at all, because the moment that you truly know yourself, you know the mystery of life, because you get to live it, because you are designed for your mystery, for your story. So what the 61 wants to know is, what is my story? Who am I? How does it all work? What does it all mean to get to the inner truth? Now here I want to kind of insert something that I've heard from the human design community, where there's this belief that projectors are not here to know themselves. And I will disagree with that. I'm going to challenge that a little bit, especially if you've got this channel of awareness, because I feel like I have a lot of awareness about myself, about my story. The thing that I would say is that even though I have this awareness, again, my gifts are not meant to be used to solve my problems, to reach the goals that I want to reach. The way that I reach my goals is by using these gifts with others, being of service in others, and again, exchanging, that energy with money. And that's how, I get to solve my problems, for lack of a better word. So I would challenge that projectors are not here to know themselves, because I do feel like I know myself a lot. But again, I would focus more that I'm not here to solve my own problems. I'm here to help other people, and by helping other people, I create those resources to be able to have a more expansive experience, so to say. Okay, another thing that I really want to emphasize about this channel is mutation. Mutation, mutation, mutation. It's what breaks us out of the old abstract cycles. It shatters the pattern, and mutation brings us into a new realization, a new recognition, a new wonder. So it's a really fascinating channel to have. Again, the challenge would be waiting for the invitation and learning to focus only on what you need to know. When we're talking about, let's do a little bit more on the 61. Like I've already mentioned, it's one of the gates of madness, and madness comes from that perpetual question of why, which leads to inspiration through knowingness, which occurs as a sudden awareness of information that doesn't have any proof or logic. So the defined mind in ajna, the questions are going to arise they're going to arise in your head by themselves. And the gift of this channel is to inspire other people and change the way they see things. And again, you want to wait for that invitation, and there could be like a lot of melancholy produced if there isn't one, a lot of sadness, because it's like, oh, I've got all these amazing insights, and nobody's asking for them. Okay, now going to the gate 24, it's the gate of returning. Here again, we're looking at an acoustic process that's involved. Hearing occurs in waves. Part of what we hear very accurately in the now, and other parts of what we don't hear well at all. So we only remember parts of what has been said, not all of it. This is kind of, again, referring to kind of like feeling like you've got two people talking to you at the same time, just one's inside your head, and you pick up on certain things, because it's like I zone out a little bit, because I start going off on like these little tangents based on what they said. I'm like, okay, pay attention, and then I go back, but I've missed something that they've said. So touch, again, is one of the things that you can try and see how that helps keep you grounded. If you have a coach, I would recommend recording your sessions, asking for those sessions to be recorded, especially because, if you tend to zone out, when you watch the call again, you're going to pick up on stuff that you missed. Creating awareness with immediate loved ones, especially if you're in a relationship, it can be very triggering for the other person when it feels like you're not listening, because it literally can look like, oh my gosh, she's zoned out, or like her wheels are turning about something else, so it can create some tension in the relationship if there isn't enough awareness around this. And you can say, okay, I have this tendency, one of the things is like touch, so maybe like as you're having a tough conversation, the other person can touch you occasionally, or maybe you can hold hands, or have their hand on your leg or something, to kind of help create that contact and keep you in that present moment. Another thing I do is set intentions, because I know that I am very prone to doing this, and especially when I'm talking to other people, I set intentions. God, please help me keep myself concentrated on what they're saying to me, help me not zone out, ideally at all, preferably not as much, things like that. Setting those intentions and that are going to help you not zone out as much. Okay, again, there's a dilemma of knowing that law of the thinker. There's three things: what you need to know, what you can know, but it's not important for you to know, and knowing what is unknowable. If you can't distinguish between the three, you're never going to find silence in your mind. So it's not just about recognizing what is knowable, it's about whether you should struggle for that knowing or not. Because like once you start the process, it literally feels like an internal struggle to try to find the answer. With this gate of return, it's called the gate of return, because like you go back over and over and over, you go back again and again and again, because you can't resolve it, and until you resolve it, you won't have silence. So again, just create a lot of awareness around that there's going to be this internal struggle to find your inner truth, and ask yourself, kind of, do I really want to go through that struggle? It's kind of like what I'm really learning to contemplate, because it's not fun. It's a lot of mental energy. Okay, so how I manage this channel. I want to say that when I look back and think of like, okay, how has this channel manifested in my life? There have been some instances where I can say, oh, okay, this channel was at play here, but it hasn't been as significant as I've experienced it now. I've been having more issues with this channel. One, because as a self-projected projector, for me, it's very important to have a safe place where I can just talk. And right now I don't have a sounding board, like someone who can act as a sounding board. My mom used to be like the perfect sounding board for me. She passed away a few years ago, and like after she passed away, like I just went through a really hard time navigating life, and being a projector with a lot of conditioning, and a lot of like experiencing rejection throughout my life. And now I see that, okay, I have so much individual circuitry, this is a reason why. It really helped put a lot of things into perspective. But what I ended up doing when I was younger is like, because I felt like nobody understood me, or I always felt kind of like an outlier, an outcast, I cut people out of my life. Kind of like that, not caring, like, okay, well, they don't understand, it's okay, I don't need them anyways. I had my mom, she was my best friend, she is my person. We, I kind of like built my world, my own inner world, and she was like my connection to the outside world. She was like the bridge that would help me navigate the outside world. So when I lost her, it's kind of like that bridge was no longer there, and I still had dad and I had my brother, but it wasn't the same. They didn't quite understand me like she did. So now that I've been spending much more time alone, again, because I don't have these relationships that I'm learning to know, create and rebuild, because I understand that they're necessary, they're helpful, they have value. I've been noticing that the thought loops are easier to fall into, because I don't have a lot of interaction with a lot of people. Again, keep in mind that I do have a line too, so I do like a lot of alone time, but I notice that when it's been just like way too much alone time, that's where I fall more out of alignment in this channel in particular. So how do I manage this channel? Awareness, lots of awareness around the law of the knower. Focusing only on what I need to know, which is hard. But I'd rather do that than go through that feeling of like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna go insane if I don't figure this out. So in order to help me focus only on what I need to know, there's like this belief that I'm learning to really integrate. I ask God, make it known to me when it's the time for me to know. Or another way of saying that is like, if I need to know it, it will be made known to me when I need to know it. So this kind of gives my mind the break. Another phrase I like to use with God is like, make it in a way I can't possibly miss, because then my brain could be like, well, what if we miss it? You know? And when I say that's like, make it in a way I can't possibly miss, my brain's like, oh, okay, it's gonna be so big, like I'm not gonna miss it, so I can relax. Asking for guidance. When I am stuck in this thought loop, I will ask God, help me see this differently. Help me see this differently. And there's this, did I skip a part? I think I skipped a part. Hold on. Maybe it's a little bit later on, but I'll include it here. Help me see this differently, and then incorporate a pause or a break, because the thing is, like, our mind is constantly going, and it's like talking to someone, asking them a question, and you don't give them an opportunity to answer the question because you keep on talking. So it's kind of like the same thing with God, with the universe. When you're searching for what is unknowable, you want to make sure to create the space for the unknowable to drop in. Otherwise, you're going to continue on these thought loops, and it's not going to be fun. I have the 24 in a conscious level, so again, it creates thought loops. And one thing that I learned is that you don't want to go for thought loops. You want spirals, okay? You want this kind of like unraveling energy, this unraveling sensation, versus round and round and round and round. For me, the spirals feel kind of like a staircase, like one of those round ones, you know, where you could go really deep in the truth, or you can go up a little bit, you know, but there's movement. You know, there's movement where you're going somewhere. When I'm creating these thought loops, it just feels like I'm going around in circles, and I'm digging a trench, but it's not really taking me anywhere. Like the stairs where I can go up and down, the trench is like the further down I go, the more stuck I get. The more stuck I feel, the more like, oh my God, I'm gonna go insane. That type of feeling. You don't get that feeling of going mad when you're thinking in spirals, okay? There's this thing that where you think that sooner or later, if you think about it long enough, you will find the truth in it, and that's not how it works. Remember, it's a very spontaneous thing. You can't control it, and the more you try to control it, the more it eludes you. So what I find that I do sometimes, like when I am stuck in this thought loop, sometimes I'll just like make up something. I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna give my brain a possibility of what the answer could be so that I can get some peace and quiet. And I am very much aware that this is just one possibility. It is not the ultimate, only one. And I'm only doing this again to give my mind that inner peace, to like, so I can feel like I'm not going insane. What can also happen is that you might go crazy returning over and over to the same unsolvable mystery. Even if you solve the mystery, you might not be able to share it with others. And this is where, like, I find that when you wait for the invitation, what happens is that the process unfolds very, very beautifully, because it's like with the person's question, you're tapping into the unknowable. And it just comes out very naturally. Like you don't even really, it doesn't feel like you're searching for it. It just feels like it's just coming out, like it's dropping in and it's being expressed. Where like if you're doing this on your own, which is gonna happen, because like remember, all these, when your mind and knowledge is defined, like all of this is being created within you. But when you're doing this on your own and there's no invitation, it's like you have the information, but you just store it. It feels like you store it for future use. Another thing I really like to use is the Sedona method. And this is a simple method of letting go of fear, frustration, anger, limiting thoughts, feelings, and beliefs that are holding you back. And you ask yourself 3 questions. 1, can I let this go? And you answer yes or no. Typically, I get a yes. If you get a no, you can kind of ask yourself, like, why can't I let this go? But normally, like, because you can let it go, right? Question number 1, can I let it go? 2, would I let it go? And 3, when can I let this go? So it's like you're holding a rock, right? The first question is like, can I let this go? You have the ability to put down the rock, to throw it, to get rid of it, right? Or you can hold it. You can do that. When you ask yourself, would I let it go? This is involving like a willingness to let it go, to release it. Because just because you can do something doesn't necessarily mean that you're willing to do something. But like I said, this is a very quick process where you're asking your brain questions. So you're interrupting the thought process, right? That's kind of like what we're looking for, ways to interrupt the continual loops. So by asking yourself, can I let this go? Your brain's going to give you a yes or no. Would I let it go? Can I let it go? Another thing that I keep in mind is that all the questions that you have asked the universe will be answered when you quiet down. These are the gaps and pauses I was mentioning before. Those are the gaps and pauses between the thinking where the knowledge can drop in. And again, it's like if you're talking all the time, the universe can't answer you because it's like, girl, like, be quiet so I can talk. Here's normally where like they say that we shouldn't bypass. Years where I would say we want to do a little bit of mental bypassing, because these insights are spontaneous. They feel like downloads, and because they have like a mutative quality to them, you know, that they're very new, they're very fresh, it's like nothing like this has been done before type of vibe. So you kind of like want to get out of the way as much as possible. So some of the ways that I do this: movement practices with the intention of releasing that mental pressure. I get out of my head, I go for a walk, I focus on the experience of the walk. Like I tend to have like a lot of awareness of like what goes on from here to here, because like that's where I'm defined, and I am a single definition, so that's a lot of energy. So when I'm walking, I tend to bring my awareness more towards the lower part of my body. How do my feet feel? How do my legs feel? I take a look around in my environment, and I do it very slowly, because when I'm that active mentally, like the thoughts are very, very fast. There's a lot of sound, there's a lot of talking in my head. That's very, 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 very fast. So by slowing down, it helps me soothe myself. Sometimes, like if the thoughts are going to be there, what I do is I just think them slower. Because like I said, they can go very, very fast. I very intentionally think slower. I think like Finding Nemo, Dory, when she's talking whale, that type of vibe. I don't know if I mentioned singing, dancing, and then I feel into, okay, how do I need to move? Do I need slow movement? Like right now, what I've really been into is swaying. I find swaying very, very soothing, and I've also been kind of like experimenting with running, a little bit of running when the energy is just way, way too much. The other day, like just maybe a day or two ago, it's late at night, it's like 1 in the morning, and I felt like I was gonna go insane because of all the thinking. So I'm like, I gotta move this energy. I went outside, I grabbed the trimming shears, huge scissors, and I started trimming bushes like at 1 in the morning. And all my kitty friends were there with me, and they were sitting in the middle of the road. I'm like, what are you guys doing? The car comes by, and I'm like in the middle of the road holding these huge pair of scissors, shooing the cats out of the road because they wouldn't move. And I'm sure the driver thought like, oh my gosh, this lady's crazy, but I had to move the energy. And like once I got that, you know, I moved it, I felt better. And then today, like, I was like, why does it hurt here? I was like, oh yeah, because it was the scissors. Another thing I do, distraction. I distract myself. I use my environment, which is markets, external markets. I go out. I go grocery shopping. Now I've done my grocery trips like much smaller so I can get out a little bit more, again, because I'm spending a lot of time alone. I feel like this is much more amplified, and when I'm able to go out, it's just, it kind of gives my brain a little bit of break, and it helps me create that space, that gap, that pause. Talking to others. I remember a while ago I was going through some kind of mental loop. I don't necessarily remember what it was right now, but I started talking to a friend, and as we were talking, I literally got the answer to like 2 or 3 things that I had been spinning my wheels on and wasn't getting anywhere. And the conversation didn't necessarily have anything to do with those 2 or 3 questions I had asked. They just dropped in. So again, distraction, being around people. Another thing that I found that they recommend is meditation. What I've been playing with lately is dropping into my G center, and it feels like I kind of get like this visual of like the universe, like the cosmos being located within my G center, and it feels like I am in space, and there's like some slight static noise, but it's very, very faint. It kind of feels like binaural beats type of vibe. And I just go in there when I'm really, really in my head. It also feels like if I were to, there's kind of like the saying within the spiritual community, like how God is within. For me, it feels like that's where I go to God inside, like in my G center. And sometimes, like, I just visualize God there and me sitting next to him, and there's no talking. When I'm doing this very intentionally to quiet my mind, there's no talking. There's like, we're communicating, but there are no words. It's more like an energetic language, or a language that's communicated in feelings. There's no sound to it. Another thing I do is listen to music. This helps soothe and release the mental pressure in your head. I have noise canceling headphones. Those things, I'm in love with them. They really help. Even like, I will turn them on even if there's no music, and it just changes the way my brain perceives sound, and it can be very, 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 very soothing. Mantras, having certain affirmations, because it's like a focused repetition, and if my mind tries to go on a thought loop, I bring it back to the mantra, and I go, nope, we're focusing on this, again, to quiet the speed in my head. Another thing that they recommended was surrendering to daydreaming. If you do this one, I want to recommend setting a timer. I do have other aspects of my chart, like I have gate 41, which has to do with fantasy, and it can be very, very easy for me to get stuck in my head, and I could literally go all day just daydreaming, and it can create like this disassociation where sometimes, like, I have a planner and I'll think like, oh, what did I do Monday? I can't remember. Oh, because I spent all day in my head that day. So I would set a timer, 5-10 minutes, give yourself full permission to daydream, and then, okay, I've done it, let's come put a close to that, and let's move, let's do something. Coaching, I find that for me, coaching is very, very soothing, again, because I have the opportunity to use my gift with others, and I find that I don't experience this issue of not listening to the clients I work with, because I really focus on like, okay, how can I help them? And it's like whatever they're saying, I'm really taking it in. And I've been doing a lot of coaching through voice messages, and this helps me because like if I do happen to tune out for a little bit, I can replay exactly what they said. So I found that to be super, super useful. Another thing that I've been doing is body tapping. I'm not a huge fan of EFT. I think it's just because like of the sequence. Like I feel annoyed that it's very structured. Right now I'm kind of like more in a free-flowing kind of like want to do my own thing type of thing. But body tapping, where I just take my fist and I'll tap on different parts of my body that feel tense, and it really helps get me into my body. And again, there's no structure. I do it very intuitively to like wherever I feel led, and that's been really helping me get out of my head. One thing I do want to mention is that I experience sensory overload. I'm prone to it because like this is a very acoustic channel, and I've got like 3 channels that are very acoustic. All my channels are acoustic. So I can very easily get overloaded in highly social situations, or in places where there's too much noise. Depending on how sensitive I am at the moment, it could be like it also affects like how well I've slept and things like that. The less sleep I get, the more sensitive I am. It can lead to more like anxiety and things like that, feeling overloaded. And this is where like noise canceling headphones can really come in. I'm starting to get into the habit of carrying them with me. We went to this party last weekend, and they had music. It was a party, and I found the music to be very, very loud, and it was getting a little bit overwhelming. I didn't have my headphones with me that time. It's just something to keep in mind. Like, this could be the reason why you get overloaded. I think I've already mentioned this. Waiting or asking for the invitation, because when there is an invitation, the process just unfolds so much better. I've already mentioned slowing down the speed of the thoughts. I feel like this is very important for me because I do have single definition with all my channels and individual circuitry, so that's a lot of energy, a lot of communication, a lot of mental process that goes on within my system. So slowing down definitely does help me. Some more like supplements that I've really been paying more attention, like taking more constantly, are magnesium chloride. I use it and I apply it to my neck when my neck is sore from the tension. Epsom salt baths, and also kind of like keeping my glucose levels in check, because I have a very active brain. The brain uses glucose to stay happy and healthy. So I find myself like when I am using my brain a lot, it's like the other day I really wanted a vanilla Coke. So I went to the fridge, I got a vanilla Coke, and it felt so good. It was like my brain was going like, yes. Or I just needed the sugar. I am very intentional with my sugar, but I am aware that I function better when my glucose levels are at a certain level. Okay, I'm going to close off this video with the personal story that I shared on my personal Instagram that illustrates a lot of the stuff that we've already talked about. This is a post from July 2020. It says, "One day, Mom and I were in the car going somewhere. I don't remember where we were going, but I was in the passenger seat, completely lost in my thoughts. Mom had glanced over at me and noticed. She said, 'I'd give anything to know what's going on in that little head of yours.' Her words brought me back from deep thought, and I laughed. So it was like literally like I remember this moment. I was staring off into space, into the sky, and like I imagine like when she looked over, she could like literally see my wheels turning. So here, there was an invitation, right? I'd give anything to know what you're thinking about. Her words brought me back from deep thought, and I laughed. I said, I would tell you, but I don't know how to express what I'm thinking with words. This is a channel of structuring. She said, well, try. Just start somewhere. I take a few moments to gather my thoughts and start. I was asking God, what are we? I mean, I know we have bodies, but He could have designed our bodies in so many different ways that I don't think we're our bodies. And we're not our brains either, because anatomically we all have the same brains, but they're just wired differently. If God is going to give people who resurrect different bodies, is a little bit of my religious beliefs, but they're going to have the same personality and memories, that has to mean that we're not our bodies or our brains. So what are we? What does the memory of us look like to God? I turned to look at her, the woman who had all the answers, and if she didn't, she would make them up and you wouldn't know the difference. She takes a deep breath, sighs, and asks, why do you ask such stupid questions? I started cracking up. After all the work I put into trying to find words for my thoughts, she has the audacity to say I ask stupid questions. Well, why is my question stupid, Mom? She says, because it doesn't have an answer. I said, it has to have an answer. All questions have answers. Channel 6124. We were quiet for a few minutes. I break the silence by saying, well, I don't know what we are, but I'm deciding to believe that in God's eyes, we're like a tiny spark of light. If we didn't have bodies or brains, I think we'd be tiny sparks of beautiful lights in different colors. And when we die, God places our spark in a small drawer somewhere in His memory. He keeps us there until He's ready to wake us up again. And that was the end of it, or so I thought. So again, it's the searching for this inner truth. I wasn't getting anything. I went to kind of like, bounce ideas off of Mom. She's like, stupid question. So I come up with my own conclusion. Okay, so it continues. About a year after, Mom turned into a spark of light that went into God's memory drawer. I was at TJ Maxx looking at jewelry. I really shouldn't have been, because our finances were really tight back then, and I don't believe in window shopping. But I came across this necklace that had a bird cage with a tiny bird on the inside and an iridescent crystal cube inside the cage. The moment I saw it, I remembered the story I just shared with you. And I smiled, because I knew God had remembered my question. This is kind of like that, spontaneous inner knowing, like where you don't know when the answer is going to come, but it will come sooner or later. I bought the necklace and added an M from another necklace I had recently broken. I've shared this before, but I'll say it again. The M is not for Mara. Mara is my first name. But for Maria, Mom, and Mom. They're both reminders of where she is, and I carry it with me often so that I remember God remembers. When God wakes her up, I'll smile and say, see, I was right. It wasn't a stupid question. And God didn't make me wait for an answer. He let me borrow a bit of your spark to wear around my neck so that I would always remember, so that I wouldn't forget. And that's the end of the story. I think like when I was going through the information, and this is what came to mind. I'm like, oh my gosh, this illustrates so many things very, very well. So I wanted to share that with y'all and end it here. If you have this channel and you'd like to share what your experience is like, by all means, my invitation is to drop it in the comments. I would love to hear from y'all. If there are any insights or things that you learned that you would like to play with, also feel free to comment those down below. It's just a reminder that you can always find me on Instagram. My handle is @JamieSalcedo. That's all for this video. I hope you guys are having an amazing day, and I will see you all next time. Thank you so much for watching. Spray some of this because the mosquitoes are vicious, y'all. Nugget, are you looking at me? Oh gosh. Okay. Mosquitoes, y'all. And I have to stop and spray some more mosquito spray because like they bit my eyelid. Like what the hell? Okay.